Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Want to get the most out of your Social Security? Stay tuned and learn how.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money. The WorryFree Retirement, with offices in Louisville, Bowling Green, and Lexington. Your host, nationally recognized retirement specialist, 5-time author, and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
Over the past 35 years, one of the biggest concerns I see with savers is how to deal with Social Security. When to take Social Security. Can I keep working when I draw Social Security? And also the darn taxes associated with Social Security. Well, in order to answer all of these questions, we have the rare opportunity in the studios here at Tony Walker Financial to have with us for the entire half hour one of the leading experts in the country on Social Security, Ms. Heather Shriver. Heather, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. So far, we've already done a radio show. Here we are with a TV show, and this is going to be some good stuff.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I think it would be wise to kind of just share people briefly a little bit about your history, but then how we met. It's kind of interesting. I was at a conference, never heard of Heather Shriver, not to say that it's slight there, but I'm at this conference, and they had some guest speakers, and you spoke on Social Security, which we are very much involved in the Social Security process. And I thought, wait a minute, and also you're a consultant. So by the way, folks, she does not work for Tony Walker Financial, not affiliated, doesn't sell anything. So now we're also using you as a resource, a paid resource. So you're coming in, we're paying you a fee, you're going to be doing some workshops. We're recording the show on June 11th, 2019, live webinar today. And the more I'm around you, the more I realize you really do know your stuff. What got you into the whole Social Security realm?
Been in this business for 25 years, in the financial planning business, and retirement income planning is a passion that I have. And about 8 years ago, when all the baby boomers were sort of flooding the gates and starting to take Social Security, I realized that there was a lot of misinformation about Social Security, and it's a complex system. It isn't as easy as, I retire, therefore I claim. It's sort of, there's a lot that goes into it, and certainly as times change, as longevity increases, there's a lot of things to consider. And so I made it a passion to just really get to know everything I could about it. And I love consumer advocacy, so it has worked very well for me. I love to do what I do.
And now you mentioned something about how it's a difficult decision. I want to go back in time a little bit. My granddad, I talk about my granddad all the time. He retired from Bell South after 43 years in 1978 or so. And he took his pension, Social Security, didn't have a lot of bills, very easy lifestyle, was worry-free. Now, you are a Louisville native.
I am.
And I know Sarah, your sister's in the studio here with us during the recording. Tell us a little bit about your background. Was it your great-grandfather that worked at the Seelbach Hotel? This is an interesting story. He and my granddad were probably a lot alike as far as, let's talk about that.
So his entire adult life was spent 50 years at the Seelbach. Albert Weibull was his name. And he spent literally from we figured about 1912 to 1962 working at the Seelbach.
This is a picture behind us
of
the Seelbach today.
Yes.
Can we go back in time a little bit? You want to?
I'd love to.
Okay, let's see what this thing, whoa, that's awesome, isn't it?
Right, it's awesome. And he was a coal shoveler. We've done some research, and he shows up as a maintenance technician. So for 50 years, he worked there, never missed a day of work. So he worked there until January of 1962. Sadly, he passed away in August of 62.
Now, how old was he then?
65, ironically,
yeah.
Right? So he had likely just taken his Social Security. Didn't take it for very long. So that's our history with Louisville. So we have a steep family history here.
Oh, speaking of family, do you I know you've got a couple of boys, don't you?
I do.
Oh yeah, good looking lads there.
Look at those
Do you
guys.
ever kind of worry about their generation and Social Security? We're going to get into that a little bit, but what do you think about this generation coming up in terms of the financial wherewithal?
Absolutely. I think that they have to be certainly more prepared. We have to be more prepared than our great-grandfathers, right? Their lives were simpler. They had the pensions. Pensions are going away, right? these guys aren't going to know what a pension is. And certainly Social Security will look different for them, I'm sure. So, thankfully they have me as a mom, so I'm constantly preaching about the importance of saving and being, taking responsibility for your own retirement. And yes, they do hear about retirement at the ripe ages of 15 and 12. So.
Now let's talk about that. Yeah, because go back in time a little bit. I did a documentary, I may have mentioned this to you, called Say Goodbye to Granddad's Retirement. This was years ago. And we talked about, when I did some research, and I know you've done a ton of research on this, but in 1935, when the government's infinite wisdom was, we're going to come up with a benefit for people, tell people a little bit about the longevity, the life expectancy when they came up with this system called Social Security in 1935 versus what we're dealing with today with people living longer.
Right. So back then, age 65 was what's called full retirement age. Not many people were living past 65, so we had a trust fund that looked amazing, right? Because people were collecting and not living long to collect the benefits. By the way,
we've got an article up here talking about this
Yeah.
whole Social Security trust fund. And can you touch on the trust fund a little bit?
Yeah, so every year the trust fund, the Board of Trustees delivers a summary of the trust fund, the state of the trust funds, and everyone's aware of it because every year we hear this sort of, story that the Social Security trust fund is going to be depleted. This year it increased by 1 year. It's going to be depleted. If nothing changes, the trust funds will be depleted by 2035. That doesn't mean it goes away. That just means that the trust funds are depleted. And so if nothing changes, it's estimated that about 77% of promised benefits could be paid at that time. Disability.
So that might be reductions, not
reduction.
Not
it wouldn't eliminate it,
Okay.
Certainly. Disability gets a far better outlook. Their trust funds aren't expected to be depleted until 2052. What does this mean? Well, it means that there are going to be changes down the pike. And people ask me all the time because one of the fears is I'm going to just take it now because it may not be there. The folks that are entering sort of the retirement years now, really I don't think have much to worry about. In fact, Stephen Goss, who is the chief actuary for Social Security, does every year, he does sort of a state of the trust funds live, it's a Facebook Live. So if you have Facebook, it's really worth watching because he talks about, for about an hour, he talks about all of those concerns. He takes consumer questions right from the
Social Security actually has actuaries. I thought the politicians got in there
No,
and just over a
Steve Goss, he's the man.
decided
He's
on
the
this.
man. So,
that's reassuring.
But it's worth listening to. They did have some technical difficulties in the very beginning, so if you do listen to it, make sure that you fast forward through that. But it's really worth the listen to really understand a little bit more about how it all works and probably to give a little bit more peace of mind to folks entering retirement right now.
And let's go before the break. I do want to go back to this idea of people living longer. I think we've got a slide here. Let's just kind of talk about longevity and what that means. And even we call it longevity risk. So help the audience understand how that relates to Social Security, but also why two spouses in this whole longevity play really make a big deal.
So longevity risk is the idea of essentially outliving your money, right? So, a lot of folks start with that. How long, the break even, if you've heard of someone, I'm sure in your business you hear them say, what's my break even? If I decide to take my benefits a few years longer, how long do I have to live for that decision to make sense? And so it really starts with, how long do I expect to live? Because if I don't expect to live very long, then possibly taking my benefits as early as I can, which is age 62 for retirement benefits, that might make sense. The problem with relying on that exclusively, so as you can see here, the average male, a 65-year-old male, according to Social Security, is expected to live to about age 84, female age 87. The problem is that to rely exclusively on that, you might be leaving money on the table. And I say this because if you're working with a married couple, if they're looking at their what they anticipate to be life expectancy, a lot of folks don't realize what that decision might do if you say, I'm only going to live, for example, to age 75.
And let me interrupt you. And occasionally when I have a couple, and the men will usually say that the men will usually say, well, I'm only going to live to 75 anyway, I want my money.
And it makes sense from that perspective, but what they're not doing is thinking about, and it's not their fault, it's just understanding what happens to the survivor. So if I have the higher wage earner saying, gosh, I don't expect to live very long, it makes sense for me to go ahead and take the income now. If that person were single, it would. If they're married and they're the higher wage earner, what happens is that when one of the two spouses dies, assuming that does come to fruition, that lower earning spouse is going to lose their benefit and they're going to get the higher benefit from their spouse.
Let me use an example. You tell me, this is kind of how I describe that to folks, and you tell me if I'm correct here. So hardworking Joe Lunchbox comes in, he and his wife are sitting there. He doesn't trust the Social Security system. He's worked hard. He wants his money. So he draws at 62. Let's say it's $2,000 a month. And let's say if he had waited till age 70, it's $3,500 a month. I'm just making up hypotheticals. What you're saying is, so Joe Lunchbox takes the $2,000. He dies at age 68. His wife, if he had, or dies at 70, let's say he dies at 70, his wife, if he had waited till 70, would collect the $3,500 a month for the rest of her life.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
And her own benefit, if she's collecting one, let's suppose it's $1,000, would go away. So now she's living on $2,000 versus a much higher benefit had he even waited a few years beyond 62. So you really have to think of that longevity risk from the standpoint of both couples, or both in the marital relationship.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So folks, what we're going to do here, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Heather's going to take a deeper dive into how to even calculate your benefits. Very confusing stuff, but we're going to make this crystal clear. You're watching the Worry-Free Retirement. I'll be right back.
Are you retired or retiring soon? Can you afford for your money to take a hit with the stock market being so volatile these days? Nobody can time the market, but having a retirement game plan with Tony Walker Financial gives you peace of mind and sleep insurance. Learn how to prevent losses in your retirement accounts and plan your retirement around an income you can never outlive. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com today to schedule a personal meeting with Tony to secure your hard-earned money. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
My question, how will you convince senior citizens that Social Security and Medicare need to be changed and get their vote?
Well, first off, the people who are on Social Security today need to understand something. Slam dunk guaranteed, that program is going to be there in place for those. Those individuals that are moving towards being on Social Security, that program is going to be there for them when they arrive there.
Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement. In case you're just now joining us, we are getting into a deep, deep dive of Social Security. So regardless of whether you're retired or retiring soon, you need to stay tuned. We've got some great information continually coming your way. Oh, by the way, a lot of people ask, well, Tony, you got an expert on there. I thought you all did Social Security analysis. We do. In fact, in our offices at Tony Walker Financial, full-time is Miss Lisa Allerkamp. So if you have Social Security questions, if maybe your retirement advisor is not really bringing this whole issue of Social Security into the fray, you need to get a second opinion, folks, because as we're going to see here in a minute, this is really, really crucial to the difference between retiring worried and being worry-free. And to help us with that, back in the studio, Heather Shriver. She's agreed to stay around. You're probably working harder than you thought. We have a signed agreement, though. You're going to still work for that same fee.
Yeah.
You can't change now, Heather. But yeah, Heather is an independent consultant working for us on this project. We really appreciate it. And if you just now joined us, you can go to YouTube. Is that correct, Aaron? So the previous shows that you can, if you want to maybe tell somebody to watch the show because of the information, just go to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's our YouTube channel, and you can call up this episode to watch. I think there's going to be some people who want to share this with others. So, all right, used to be, you had a lot of games you could play with the Social Security system. They'd made some law changes. Let's talk about the restricted application. If you could explain that briefly, what's that all about before we get into some other information?
Yeah, this is a point of confusion for a lot of folks because it used to be, like you said, there used to be some claiming strategies. Back at the end of 2015, there was something called the Bipartisan Budget Act that essentially grandfathered out or phased those out for other than a few select folks. So file and suspend has been done away with. That was done away with in April.
Describe real briefly,
April 29th.
What was file and suspend? File and suspend used to be used by the higher wage earner. They would file at full retirement age and immediately suspend the benefit. The reason they would do that is so that a dependent spouse or even a dependent child could collect benefits under their record while they were in suspension. The higher wage earner would then pick up their benefits as late as age 70, earning those delayed retirement credits along the way. That went away, okay? What we have left, though, that a lot of folks leave on the table in terms of income is something called filing a restricted application. How this works is I am married, my spouse is already collecting a benefit, and the critical ingredient is that I have my own retirement benefit as well, and that I was born prior to January 2nd, 1954. That's a critical
date. If you weren't born by then, you cannot use this strategy. But let's suppose my husband has already filed for benefits. I'm now turning 66. So these folks are turning 66 this year. Instead of filing for my own retirement benefit, I say I want to file restricted, meaning I'm restricting my application to half of my husband's benefit. He's already collecting. I'm going to collect half of his benefit. Now, this doesn't take the benefit away from him. I'm collecting 50% of his primary insurance amount, the full retirement age benefit. I'm going to collect that until I turn 70, and then I'm going to switch over to my own. A lot of folks don't realize they can do this, so it's something that's missed. So January 2nd, 1954, born before that date, is really where you need to have your ears perk up if you're one of those folks.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Now let's jump right into it, because you have benefits. How do you determine these benefits? Let's get into exactly, and then to this 35 years of earnings test. Walk us through some of
Yeah,
this.
so very quickly, you have to have 40 quarters of coverage to even be eligible for Social Security. That equates to about 10 years of earnings. Once you've reached that 40 quarters of coverage, you're forever more eligible for your benefit. But your benefit, or your primary insurance amount, is calculated based upon your highest 35 years of work. This is important because a lot of folks don't understand that if they have less than 35 years of work, those other years are going to be filled with zero. So it isn't that if I have 20, I'm only going to be basing it on 20. It's 20 plus 15 zeros, right? So the more we can work, the better. Now, so think about the stay-at-home parent. They might fall into this. Government workers may fall into this, and they're in totally different sets of rules. So let's suppose we're dealing with a civil service retirement system, or even a teacher. There's very few teachers that fall into this now, and I believe Kentucky doesn't, but some teachers don't pay into Social Security. So those folks won't have the quarters of coverage. They're sort of in their own playing field. They have different rules, and we won't get into that. But think about the business owner. Some business owners pay themselves very little in earned income, and then they come to getting toward retirement. They go, uh-oh, I don't have very much in earned income. I have years that I didn't report any. So those folks can really benefit from business owners bolstering their earned income that's subject to Social Security taxes, or even people that took time away from work and are now returning to the workforce. It really can positively increase their primary insurance amount.
Okay, so FRA, full retirement age. Let's kind of throw up this slide here. What is that, and why is full retirement age such a crucial thing to understand?
It is important because not everyone's full retirement age is created equal. It's based upon your year of birth. So folks that were born between 1943 and 1954, they have a full retirement age of 66. But someone who's turning 62 this year, 1957 person, their benefit full retirement age is 66 and 6 months. The reason it's critical to understand, I think yours you said was 19.
I was born in 1960.
Right, so you're 67. So you really need to understand and not assume that your full retirement age is the same as Jim Bob down the street, because everything hinges on that. The primary insurance amount we just talked about, you get 100% of that once you hit full retirement age. Also, you don't get into issues with working and collecting a benefit once you hit full retirement age.
Okay, and I apologize, folks. We've got so much to cover. This is why she's doing a workshop for over an hour today with questions. I mean, a wealth of knowledge here. We really appreciate this. Okay, this comes up a lot, Heather. Joe Lunchbox comes in. He's been working 35 years. He's burned out. He and his wife are sitting there, and he says, Tony, can I retire? I look at the information based on their lifestyle expenses. This is all we do. And I say, you're good to go. He says, by the way, I want that Social Security. Well, we're trying to analyze this to see. No. I just want that Social Security. He quits work, takes his Social Security. 6 months goes by. Martha's tired of seeing him on the recliner watching reruns of The Rifleman, chases him back to work. He makes $40,000 a year. What's up with that? Is there a problem now?
Yes. Anytime that you take benefits, you claim benefits before your full retirement age, again, important to understand what that date is. If you continue to work while you take benefits, there could be a problem because there's something called the retirement earnings test, or the earned income limit. So for 2019, for example, in your case of Joe Lunchbox, he's making $40,000. But if he makes more than $17,640, the excess income, the income over that amount, reduces his benefit by 50%.
So he could go out and make a job, work at a job and make exactly $17,600.
And have no problem.
Okay.
And have no problem.
When you go
but
over
the fact that he's got, that means that they're going to withhold benefits. Now, what I'll tell you and caution you is, if he comes back to you and says, I'm going back to work now, he needs to be proactive and reach out to Social Security and let them know so that they adjust his benefits proactively, because I've heard many a case where it catches up with them 1, even 2 years later, and they get a letter. The consumer gets a letter saying, our records indicate you made too much money. Please send us a check back for $10,000. And they're calling you. I don't know, right? So you want to be proactive with that.
Now, can you make that change at any time or go back to Social Security? How does all that work?
You would contact Social Security and say, hey, I've been reemployed. This is what I anticipate making, and they will make that adjustment. What they technically do is if his benefit is $2,000, he's going to have anticipated $10,000 of excess earnings. They'll withhold benefits for a full 5 months and then start to pay, and they'll do the same thing the next year. So being mindful. Now, this does go away once you hit full retirement age, and it isn't a permanent loss. So let's suppose he does call, they withhold those 5 months of benefits. Once he hits full retirement age, they recalculate, they being Social Security, recalculate the benefit to account for those missed months of benefits, and they increase his monthly benefit.
So he'll get it back.
He does get it back,
time.
But it's a headache, and it's also a very stressful thing to get that letter in the mail. So,
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, folks, we are going to talk about taxation of benefits. This is probably, don't you think this is one of the biggest blunders?
This is a biggie, yeah.
Okay, good stuff coming up. I'm Tony Walker with Social Security expert Heather Shriver. We'll be right back. Have you recently retired, been laid off, or offered a buyout? Has the company you work for recently moved or been acquired or closed its doors forever? Then take advantage of this opportunity to move your 401k to safer territory. Why continue to risk your hard-earned money when you don't have to? Let's meet in person today to discuss your retirement options. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com to schedule your no-obligation appointment to meet with me in person. Do it today. Welcome back to the WorryFree Retirement, and we are doing a deep dive into Social Security. I want to remind you, at Tony Walker Financial, we have full-time folks that can help you with all of your retirement planning needs, and of course we have Lisa Allerkamp there. Again, we charge nothing for our services in terms of any planning, Social Security analysis. Just go to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let us know how we can help. But today, we have one of the leading experts in the country on Social Security, Heather Shriver. Heather, we're moving through this show very quickly. I wish we had 2 hours.
Me too.
Well, you said you were recently on a
3-hour.
But you filled up the time, you said.
I did. I could keep talking and talking.
Yeah, so there's so much to know. But
Yeah.
I think what we want to get into now is the understanding that Social Security is not just about one spouse. It's about both spouses. We talked about claiming strategies and all that. But now let's get into taxes, because this can have huge effects in terms of other income coming in to affect the Social Security. We've got a great graphic here if you want to walk through this for us.
Absolutely. So we talked about, before the break, we talked about the earned income limit, right? So if you make money before full retirement age, it can possibly reduce your benefits. You get those back, but it's only the earned income of the claimant. In this case, when we're talking about taxes, now we're talking about income from the entire household. And that's an important differentiator. The first thing you need to do is figure out what the provisional or combined income is. It's sort of a fake calculation, if you will, but it's where we start. So as you can see, you take 50% of the Social Security benefits that are collected, plus the adjusted gross income of the household, plus non-taxable interest. Odd thing to put in there, but it is for this purpose. So think of things like municipal bond interest, if there is any. That's what is your provisional income. Once you've gone through that step, then you go to what's here on the bottom. Let's look at a single person. If that figure is under $25,000, there's no problem, and Social Security isn't subject to any taxes.
Zero taxes.
Zero taxes. If that figure is between $25,000 and $34,000 for a single individual, as much as 50% of the benefit can be taxed at the marginal tax rate of the individual. Anything above $34,000 can be taxed as much as 85%. They give you 15% free and clear. They're very kind that way. But as much as 85% is fair game. Now the increases goes up slightly for married couples. You can see here below $32,000, no tax. Somewhere between $32,000 and $44,000, as much as 50%. Above $44,000, as much as 85%. What I'll tell you here is these are not indexed. These numbers have been like this since, I think, 1985. this is a problem.
Yeah.
Because what do we all have in retirement? We have other assets earmarked for retirement, and what when they come into you, what do they have mostly?
Well, 401ks.
401k. What do we know about 401ks?
Haven't been taxed
They
yet.
haven't been taxed. What do we know about turning 70 and a half?
Got to take the money.
Right? So this is why it's so important to look at that claiming age decision in light of everything else that they have when they come to see you.
So can I interrupt you real quick in the essence of time? So an example of a planning strategy. A lot of people want to look at Roth conversions, which again, folks, we do all this. We have somebody on staff that can help with the tax analysis. Again, this is why Tony Walker Financial is different. We're doing holistic planning, folks. It's not a one-shot deal here. But let's use an example. So let's say we've looked at all the provisional income. They fall within 32 to 44. Everything's fine, right? So you have 50% of their income is taxed for Social Security. But all of a sudden they say, well, we want a new car, Tony, and we don't have any cash, and we'll just take our $50,000 out of our 401k, and yeah, we know there's taxes, but walk us through what happens when they take that $50,000 out, and that hits their tax return to their provisional income.
Right. So now we've added $50,000 if they're taken out of their qualified assets. Now they're in the above $44,000, and they now are subject to as much as 85% being subject to tax. I say as much as because it isn't all or none, right? There's a calculation that goes into it. But you have to think of the ripple effect of those decisions. You mentioned Roth conversions. If we can get to folks before they even get to the place at which they're taking their benefits, that's what's so critical, is trying to make these planning choices before they even get to the point where they're claiming. A Roth conversion is a great idea if you can do that before you take the benefits, because what do we know about Roths? If there are qualifying distributions, those distributions are tax-free. Are they included in adjusted gross income? They're not. So that is a way to mitigate some of the tax risk associated with having a lot of qualified plan assets and IRA assets in retirement.
So you've been doing this 25 years. What, in conclusion, and again, thank you so much for your time. I wish we did have 2 hours. But in conclusion, what would you tell people, regardless of whether they're retired or retiring soon? And for a lot of people, I'm not trying to dog other advisors, but maybe advisors don't really get into this, let's just say. Or maybe they don't even have an advisor. Why is it important for somebody to work with a full-service agency like Tony Walker Financial that does retirement planning like this?
Well, I think it's great that you have Lisa in-house to help with those decisions and understanding that it is a holistic planning decision. It isn't, I hear of some folks and advisors that say, oh, you should file at 62. You should They have sort of a rule of thumb, and there is no rule of thumb in this, as we've seen. We've only hit the tip of the iceberg here, but we really have to look at the individual, what their income need is, what types of other assets they have to help them get to that income need, what the taxes look like in that. That's all. It's very important, and so working with a holistic advisor is critical, in my opinion.
Heather, I'm so sorry we're out of time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, thanks for coming to Louisville, Kentucky to record this.
My pleasure.
So folks, basically, we are here to help. By the way, we are going to have a webinar coming up soon called How to Roll Over Your 401k to Safer Territory. That webinar is live. It's at noon, July 16th. You can register for that on TonyWalkerFinancial.com. If you would like to go through a retirement planning analysis, Social Security, 401ks, whatever you'd like to sit down and talk to me about in person, again, all you got to do is log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com, click on that Let's Get Started button. And one more thing, we're excited. We're over there at LEX TV in Lexington, my own stomping ground. We now have permanent offices there, so if you're in that area and you would like to meet with me in person, please, again, feel free to do so. I'd be happy to do that. But until next week, you've been watching the WorryFree Retirement. You remember, if all else fails, you be worry-free. Make it a good one.